Hello, welcome to the third installment of the video Hilgo, Velomobile, and Deliberative Democracy. I'll first go over maybe a bit of the stuff on Hilgo that I didn't in either of the two previous videos. I put in, and this is only going to be of interest to people who have or considering getting a velomobile, but I shortened the trailing arm here in order to increase the steering stability. And but anyways, I don't know how that's going to work out yet, because I haven't tried the same hill and the same crappy road surface as I did last time. It was about a 5% downhill at least. See how that works. I talked last time about how this is a bit of a sweat box. So I drilled this hole in the what's called the stagnation point, and inside there's aircraft quality ventilation hose that goes back to about here to try and make myself a bit cooler on those hot days. I don't, you know, it's going to help marginally, but what can you do? I'll show you a photo of these NACA ducts, and they provide some ventilation without disturbing the airflow too much outside. I sealed up those were where the headlights used to be, and since I never plan on traveling at night, I thought I'd seal them up for better aerodynamics. They say that you know, you should have, when you got airflow going through the unit, you should have at least double the opening on the back so it can escape easily enough. So I drilled 2.5-inch holes back there. Anyways, that's enough of that stuff for this video. I want to get a bit into this book, the Changing Maps book, and so I want to talk today about, well, class warfare. On page 240 in this book, and keep in mind this book is 25 years old, 27 years old, but listen to what they wrote back then. Page 240. Consider, for example, the emerging threat to our societies of class warfare. This threat is implicit in one of the governance project scenarios. It is as applicable to the United States as it is to Canada, and is, I believe, the most likely outlook for the future of both nations, unless the two societies actively intervene to change the flow of history. Excuse me, I'm just coming out of COVID a bit, and plus I don't talk too much, so yeah, when I get in one of my rants, I tend to have to clear my throat a bit. This is the same sheet of paper I handed out to people on the road 27 years ago, or when I was, I guess it would have been 24 years ago when I actually started out on the road. But, okay, from there, it talks about putting them on here. Maybe I'll leave that one for a later lecture. I'll concentrate on that class warfare stuff. So, class warfare, it's mainly due to the extreme right and the extreme left, right? And there's a statistical analysis from just a few months ago, I think, and they use this term, the exhausted majority. Like, most of the people in society are in this big class called the exhausted majority, because we're sick and tired of the idiocy on the extreme right. We're sick and tired of the idiocy on the extreme left. The extreme right, like, that stuff we know about already, like white supremacy and Emmett Till and Heather Heyer, and I'll put some links to to those names down below. But what I want to concentrate on today, because it's not as well analyzed, or as it's not as scary. Let's put it that way. It's not as scary as the extreme right. The extreme right, you know, they'll kill people, right? Emmett Till, Heather Heyer. The extreme left, they're more into getting people fired. Hey, get over. My cat's going where she should be. Yeah, the extreme left, they got a problem too. Like, two wrongs don't make a right, and they need to be held accountable for their bullshit also, even though they're not as bad. Good example is, this is just October 2022 issue of the Atlantic. Really good story in here, or article called "The Scapegoat," and it's about a museum curator who got fired because she was supposedly not woke enough or whatever. I won't go into it. I'll try and find a link. I don't know when the Atlantic puts their links up, but I'll put the link down below. I want to give a bit of a definition on the extreme left. This guy's great, John McWhorter. This book, Woke Racism, really good book. If you go on YouTube and just key in John McWhorter, he does some really good interviews. He's a linguistics professor, and the way he speaks, like, you know, I could listen to this guy recite the telephone book. He's great, but you know, he talks about the important stuff, like, and there's one really good interview on being interviewed by Bill Maher, and like, Bill Maher doesn't like the extreme right or the extreme left either. He's not afraid to let people know. But the definition of the extreme left given by John McWhorter, and I'll paraphrase a bit. He said, so there's people on the left, and that's okay. And then there's people on the far left, and that's okay. But then there's people on the far left who are just plain mean, and that's where the trouble starts. So he gives a lot of examples in here, and that Atlantic article is obviously one of them. I'll give another one though. There's a university in Toronto, used to be called Egerton or Ryerson University, and Egerton Ryerson lived in the 1800s. He essentially got the whole education system started in Ontario back in the 1800s, like public education. But at some point, the government asked him to start up education for the Indigenous people in Canada, and so there's this thing. If you're not from Canada, you might not recognize the term the residential schools. Now, residential schools were active for most of the 20th century. Terrible places, run, you know, often by the churches, the you know, Catholic Church, Anglican Church, United Church, and they essentially tore children away from their families. They told, hundreds of miles away, told the kids they'd get punished if they used their own language. The physical and mental abuse was horrendous. they found mass graves, terrible stuff. So Ryerson, I'll backtrack a bit. The government asked Ryerson to get schools going for Indigenous people. And why did they ask him? Because he knew Indigenous people. In his early 20s, he lived on the Mississauga Reserve. He knew the Anishinaabe language fluently. One of his best friends was a Mississauga chief, and in fact, in later years, he nominated this same chief to head up the Department of Indian Affairs for all of Western Canada. So he, talked to the Indigenous people and about these schools, and most, or large proportion of the Indigenous people wanted to learn about agriculture because, hunting and fishing can only get you so far. So a lot of them wanted to learn about agriculture. So that's what Egerton and Ryerson started up. He started 2 schools, and totally unlike the residential schools, attendance was voluntary. They could still use their own language, and he had the Indigenous people themselves running the schools. But they didn't last very long because they didn't get enough funding. And 2 years after Ryerson died, then they started up the residential schools that became the really horrific places that us Canadians know about. Just want to make sure I've got everything here. But anyways, getting back to the extreme left, they're looking for scapegoats, right? And they, I don't know, is it fun for them? Are they having a good time doing this stuff? I can't believe that they're actually that stupid. But anyways, they got the bunch of university students who were throwing paint on Ryerson's statue and tearing it down and whatever. But the university administration, instead of actually saying, no, Ryerson was a good guy, he actually tried to help the Indigenous people, they caved in. Like cowards, right? And it reminds one of the Cultural Revolution in China in the 60s and 70s. It reminds one of the McCarthy era in the States back in the 50s. If you get mean people like McWhorter's talking about, combine that with people who are cowardly, then a whole bunch of really bad stuff goes down. Anyways, that's my rant for today. Thanks for listening.